philosophy here, Dennis, on Dynasty.
Yeah,
So I
very
just
good.
started recording it, kind of our pre-show, because I feel like he's saying some stow. Let's Before you get into that, let me rewind. When you say don't feel like taking chances, that what how do you define, say, and I'm assuming a big chance versus a little, kind of a grade, like, ooh, this is a big, this is a little. And you said, I don't feel like taking chances. I assume you meant major issues like giving up draft capital,
Yeah, when I
good
talk about
players. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? I was trying to define what you thought that meant.
yeah, when I'm talking about taking big chances in Dynasty, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in Dynasty, one of your best opportunities sometimes can be when you spot a player
Mm-hmm.
that is underperforming for some given reason, and you expect them to be landing in a better situation soon
You mean in their own team or in another team?
with a new team usually, but sometimes in their own team. Let's say it's a really solid, wide receiver who's behind in the pecking order.
Right.
And all of a sudden, wide receiver one is gone in free agency. Wide receiver two is there, but you know, they're not sounding, the team isn't sounding like he's their guy. So all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden it's like, okay, that new guy, if they bring in a new guy,
Mm-hmm.
they're bringing him in for a reason. So one of the advantages you can gain sometimes in Dynasty is when you think you are smarter than your competition.
Mm-hmm.
And the, when I look at the landscape, because that's one of the reasons that I do my little chart that shows who's where on, the pecking order on teams and whatnot, and where their contracts are and stuff like that. When I did it last year, the last 2 years, I saw instantly some spots where I said, okay, like Philadelphia last year. I knew Philadelphia was going to upgrade at running back. I didn't know whether it was going to be a Saquon Barkley or a draft pick, but I knew they weren't going to be going into the next season. Now, let's say before everybody figured it out that it was Saquon, I had figured out it was going to be Saquon. Then I'm willing to take that big chance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm willing to roll the dice because that's such an upside situation. But you know, this going into this year,
Mm-hmm.
I look at things and the players that are most likely to move,
Right.
are not players that I really think the world of. Debo Samuel, looking at the erratic nature of his data in recent years, I'm not sure what a good fit would be for him. So I'm not going to take any chances there. Will DK Metcalf be dealt? Is that reason to go after, you know, Najigba Smith? Maybe, but he's probably too expensive. He had a good year last year. He had a good upside year. And so when I look at the landscape that's out there right now, and then you hear the rumors and like Stafford leaving and going somewhere different, how is that going to affect the Rams? Do I bail on guys? Well, no, I didn't think it was real. So when I say I'm not willing to take a big move, I usually only take a big move with my fantasy teams when I'm in a total rebuild. When and then I'm targeting young players where I don't care where they're probably locked in contract. So but I'm trading for them because I think they underperformed last year because they were a rookie, and maybe second year they'll have a big bump. I did that a couple years ago, grabbed Nico Collins, and that worked out quite well. But going into this year, I have the luxury that my surviving fantasy dynasty fantasy football teams that I will be managing next year. I only
Right.
got one team that really underperformed last year. I lost Prescott, Rashi Rice, and Godwin.
Yep.
So I've got a reason to believe that I'm going to be stronger. And then Tua is also on that team, and he missed a chunk of time. So I look at that team and I can't possibly have that bad of injuries. And I've got draft capital. So I'm going to improve the team. So this is not a time to tear it down.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean that if I get an offer or if I find somebody who's after a player, let's say somebody really is hot after Dak Prescott and I can turn him for two or three pieces,
Mhm.
I'll take that chance because he's an aging quarterback who is good but not great. And, I've got him ranked as QB9 right now. That's solid. But at age, he's going into his age 32 season. He's not a can't trade guy. So because it's an underperforming team from last year, despite the injuries, it was an underperforming team. There's no guarantee that the guys that were hurt are going to come back and be as good as they were in their prime. They're all a year older. So if I get an overwhelming offer or I get somebody who's interested in a player, I'm going to push that offer to try to improve the team. But on my own, when I looked at my rosters this year, with the draft capital I have, I'm going to be able to fix any hole that I have. So I've got contending teams. They're all going to be contenders for the playoffs, and they're only going to be better with draft picks this year. So I probably am not in a position that I want to gamble and take big moves because I think there's money to be made just
Mhm.
by playing the hand I've got right now.
Mhm.
Um, and that's a luxury situation to be in. It means that I've drafted well, and it also means that I on the teams that were weak in the past,
Mhm.
I've gone ahead and overpaid for like elite quarterbacks or whatever, and now I'm ready to take a shot at the playoffs and to make it to that next level, which is making money with that team. And then, for instance, our FPPC team, we so 2 years we've been working on that team together.
Mhm.
2 years ago, we finished third. That was a cash. We're pleased with making money. Last season, finished second. We've got some good pieces on that team. We also have good draft capital. We got a first and two second round picks. We'll be wheeling and dealing if need be, but I kind of like our chances.
I
We
tell you
made
what,
some.
why don't I pull that up
Yeah, good idea.
and uh uh why don't we talk about that team from my, I've got some questions and here it is. This is Boilermaker Crawfish. We finished second last year. Good job, Dennis. I'm about ready to win now. I think we've goofed around long enough.
And
Okay, so
this is a one QB team
one
to
QB.
let people know.
So
And
we got
and
Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Goff. I mean, we just let's talk quarterback. So I thought last year Stroud was gonna his trajectory was gonna be higher than it was,
yeah,
and now I'm coming in thinking, so almost I see him as kind of about the same. I'm not seeing this movement up to some next level. It seems to me he's still in streaming mode. He hasn't moved to got to play him every week. Golf, to me, given uh, his indoor bias, his whatever's is kind
Yep.
of always been streaming. So it seems to me that we have two viable streamers, and then Richardson's the odd duck. Again, thought he was going to be better, wasn't. In fact, maybe even took a step back a little bit. So kind of a weak streamer. So I see two solid streamers and him. So are you thinking different, or would you trade any of those? How are you seeing our quarterbacks here?
Yeah, Goff is a guy I'll probably hang on to
Hmm.
because while he is not what I would call a super elite guy,
He's not a
he's
Hurts, Allen.
no, no,
No.
but he's a solid. Right now, I've got him ranked as QB7
Hmm.
going into next year, and he is a solid 7. Like
So he's
he
going to be our
performs
flagship of the streaming type. In other words, we'll defer to him probably more than, say, Stroud or Richardson.
when Goff is at home.
Yeah, it'd be hard
It's
not
going
to
to be
play him.
really hard to get him out of the lineup.
Yeah.
And when Goff is on the road, then we play the matchup game. We
Yeah.
see the
What we got.
situation
Yeah.
that is going on. So Richardson's an intriguing guy. So if he gets off to a quick start
Mhm.
and all of a sudden is turning heads, because he is the kind of guy that, right now I've got him ranked as QB 26.
Right.
Okay. So he's not a viable starter every week.
Mhm.
But when he uses those legs and can run, he's a better fantasy quarterback than real quarterback right
Yeah.
now, than
Yeah.
real NFL quarterback. The problem with that is those guys tend to find their way to the bench if they don't win.
Yeah.
So Stroud is a solid, he's not going anywhere. Houston will build around him. And at times last year, when he had his full complement of wide receivers, he did well. But he doesn't give you that upside with the rushing
Is he
ability.
about 14 on your list? Where do you have him on MVP and whatnot?
So, so yeah, so he actually ranks pretty low right now.
Even below 14.
He's 27th on my
Wow,
rankings,
Dennis.
right? Yeah. So he's
Wow.
he's the
So he
kind of
really
guy.
took a step back then.
He took a huge step back because an MVP,
Yeah.
uh, he fell off the face of the earth. He was a 51.6
Man,
last year.
that's barely that's a
It
two
was
three.
awful. It was
That's a
awful.
2-3.
Yeah, that is awful play.
Wow.
But again, when he had his full complement of wide receivers, so his first 6 games
Hmm.
before Collins and Diggs started going out.
Hmm.
So his first 6 games, he was basically right around an 87 to 90 in MVP. If you look at
Hmm. Kind of a
the
low
performances,
QB1,
so
2.
low
Yeah.
QB1 guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you look at his best games during the year, his best 6 games, that's about where he was. He was about a 90, low 90s in his best 6 games. So when I compare that to others, it's like the guy's got the upside
Mhm.
if that offense is clicking. And will the offense be
Is
clicking?
there anybody out there? I don't even know if they, bidding's not allowed. So we can't even. Is there a way to see free agency? I don't guess there is.
Not really well in here. What you have to basically do is go into it is actually tough in FPPC. The one thing I don't like about what they
We
do
should
is
be able to see who.
they make you work to find stuff because you would end up having to go into the stats thing and find
I'm just wondering, is there
thing
any
that
other
way.
quarterback? Is there
Oh, I'm sorry.
any
Go over to player rankings. Actually,
player?
go over to the top. Go over to player rankings,
Uh-huh.
And
Draft
well,
Island. No,
that's not
no,
going to give you that.
no.
Interesting. Yeah, when I've looked, I have not been able to find unless you go team to team and
Yeah.
look, and it's a little hard to see what's out there.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I don't like about um, the
Mm-hmm.
way they do Dynasty and FPPC. They're built more for
Mm-hmm.
playing
Redraft.
for redraft and best ball is their strength. But if you look in, it's harder to see what's available, but there really aren't any quarterbacks available. Like everybody is in this league, everybody has two or more solid,
So you would
starters.
almost have to target a draft pick quarterback type.
Yeah, and we might take a shot at that, even though we're deep in quarterback. I'm not worried about quarterback. I'm
Well, let me
more
ask you this. If golf gets hurt early in the season, are we in trouble?
no, I'd have no problem playing Stroud because
Mm-hmm.
Stroud won't kill you. If he's got wide receivers healthy, he won't kill you. And I do believe in the so-called sophomore slump, and then year three, how well does the player adapt to what other teams did to him? There's such a leap between the pro or the college game to the pro game. And some guys play pretty good. Now, Stroud's MVP was only 73 his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
So in my stats, he didn't light up the world. But again, if you look at his best 6 games, which I love doing for rookies,
Mm-hmm.
you look at his best 6 games and down the stretch in that first rookie season, his MVP was right around 100. So he was at that elite level for a
Mm-hmm.
short period of time. He was close to that at the beginning of the season last year. He couldn't sustain it once he lost his receiving core.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the season he didn't have that solid receiving core. I expect Houston to add a veteran wide receiver or a really good draft pick at wide receiver this year. And when will Tank Dell be back is the big question. I hate when guys get hurt so late in the season because they're probably not going to be ready to start the season. Diggs is gone. I don't see them re-signing Diggs. So it's Nico Collins and probably a draft pick that they bring in until Dell comes back. They got a lot of rebuilding to do
Mm-hmm.
with that Houston offense. But if they do it right, he could bounce back to being a solid, what I envision that we have in Goff, Richardson, and Stroud is that we'll have a top 7 guy
Mm-hmm.
on a weekly basis. So we don't have a Josh Allen. We don't have a Jalen Hurts. We don't have a Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
But what we've got is a guy who's not going to lose points that much for us at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And on their best weeks can win us a week. So I'm looking at that quarterback position. When I look at position by position with a team,
Mm-hmm.
I say, do we have a big advantage, small advantage, no advantage, weak? Is it a
We're
weakness?
giving points away.
When I look at quarterback, I don't necessarily think we're somewhere between no advantage and small advantage because we've got 3 guys who on any given week. So if this was a dynasty best ball team where I didn't have to decide every week who to start, I'd like our chances with these 3 guys because they do put up some big weeks. It's a question of picking the right guy on the right week. Now, I will say this. If you go back and grade our performance last year, there were only 2 weeks that we didn't pick the guy who was substantially better, more than 5 points better. We occasionally picked a guy where he was 1 point less than the other. Who cares? That's not going to hurt you. Most of the weeks, we picked the guy who was more than 5 points above the rest. So we did quite well in picking the matchups last year. But will we repeat that this year? I don't say we're going to be perfect at playing the matchup games. So when I look at it, I say we're somewhere between small advantage and no advantage. And I'm okay with that at the quarterback position in a 1 QB league.
Yeah.
When I look at our running back situation, I look at one really good in Bucky Irving. We've got Chuba Hubbard, who should start the season just fine. So I'm not looking at that as being a bad position for us either. Now the question is, what do we do with those other positions? Does
we got to cut
Denver,
down to
we've got to cut down.
How many to 20 or
we got to cut down? I believe I think we have to cut down to 20. Yes. So we've got to cut 3. Now we're carrying 2 defenses right now.
Well, one goes.
So one will go. Indy will go. That'll be the easy one to cut. And, so that's an easy cut.
I'm not sure if we need to hold to Jelani
We don't need to carry
anymore.
Jelani Woods. We can cut him as well. I like our situation at tight end with Ertz and TJ Hawkinson. Mm-hmm. I think tight end is a plus for us, especially in a tight end premium situation. When I look at wide receiver, that's our big advantage.
Yeah.
We are loaded.
CeeDee
Lamb, Jalen Waddle will be better this year. And then we've got CeeDee Lamb. We've got Devonta Smith. We got Cooper Kupp and T. Higgins. I mean, that's a dream of a wide receiver lineup.
We should have our decision will be who we leaving out almost. Yeah.
And where Kupp ends up is the big decision because I don't think he'll be back with LA, which is actually good for us. Mm-hmm. How about Cooper Kupp playing for the Houston Texans alongside Nico Collins
and Stroud? Yeah.
With Stroud, we'd kind of like that. I don't know where he'll end up, but he'll end up somewhere that'll probably be a decent passing team.
I mean, as I'm looking, the third, I'm looking at Akins maybe. Or
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
We
got time to think.
We got time to think, and I believe we got to be down to. I think we only have to be down to 20. We'll check the rules on that, but the Indy defense, Jelani Woods are the 2 easy cuts.
How many first round picks do we have this year?
We have 1 first rounder and 2 second round picks.
Okay,
so we are in good shape.
So we got a little better than.
We'll add 3 quality players.
Yeah,
and we'll again be looking running back.
Well, see, I'm looking forward to your opportunity to find and forge and hoard some handcuff types that we maybe go for. In other words, versus a shot in the dark rookie. At some point, I like to switch to these deeper running back types, to forge and hoard.
Yeah, we were offered a trade for 2 sort of marginal running back prospects for our second round pick, and I just didn't feel that was the right move.
A third round, I'm thinking I'd consider, but a second round, I'm with you.
It was 203. So I made him offer of 211 and a future third round pick, and they turned it down. Yeah. And I was fine with that. Again, this team doesn't need major rebuild.
Right.
We've got 2 solid running backs to start the season.
Right.
We'll add 2 more running backs in the draft, probably. And the greatest thing about FPPC is our late round picks can be veteran running backs.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But we're in good shape with this team. This is a team that'll make the playoffs, and it'll be just a matter of do we choose wisely
So
At
what's
running back,
our first round pick? What number is it?
will be number 11 because
Number 11.
we'll
So
go,
kind of on the turn. We'll have a 11 and then a 2, 3.
and then 11, 3, and 11 will be our
Okay.
2, 11, 2,
Yeah.
2, 3, 2,
So
11. It's
we'll
our own
get
picks.
two pretty good ones then, maybe.
Yeah, I think we will. And looking at
What's
who's
the
been
landscape? What are you thinking? It's going to be a
probably running back.
yeah,
I think the first two picks will most likely be running back.
yeah.
Um, the interesting one is since it's a one QB league, depending on where the quarterbacks land, the rookie quarterbacks land in the draft, even though quarterback isn't one of our strengths, at 211, if
There's somebody there.
Shadur's, yeah, if Sanders, Ward, or Dart are available at 211 and they landed on a good team
Yeah,
in a good situation, I might have to look at that.
yeah.
And, we're also open to the idea of trading either Stroud or Richardson.
Mhm.
I would prefer to trade Richardson if we trade one of them. I'd be pretty happy going into the season with Stroud and with Goff.
Mhm.
The only problem is we do not know at this point in time
Mhm.
where the bye weeks will land.
Yeah.
And last year, we had two of our three quarterbacks that were out on week 14. So,
Yeah. That
you
was
know,
a bad deal.
but having Goff, we
Yeah.
knew we had one guy who would be starting. So, that's the big worry. If you cut down to two quarterbacks
Mhm.
and there isn't a lot available of streaming options off the waiver wire,
Yeah.
then you're screwed. You're going to lose a week. And in FPPC, you want to at least finish in the top 8 in points every week, so you get a point, you get a playoff point, you get a victory point, they call them. You don't want to go a week without winning a point, and that's what we did a lot of good last year. Is we didn't have a lot of scoreless weeks. When we had a loss head to head, we still picked up 1 or 2 points, which is why we were able to make the playoffs without any problem. So I'm looking at that as, this year I want to get I want to be first or second in the league. So we don't have to worry about that first round. That's our goal for this year. And I think we can make it because we have 3 picks that should pay off. And then later rounds, we're probably taking a veteran running back who's in a good situation or a backup to a guy that we got. And you never know who's going to be available because everybody's got to cut down. So it'll be fun to see what happens. Last year, we were able to pick up a couple of guys and just kind of patch and fill at the running back position. Now, I made the mistake of trying to float a couple of our rookies last year, and I lost them at running back. So, I'd be feeling better with Tyrone Tracy going into this year.
Yeah.
But, you try to we won a week by doing that. We would have lost that week, and we couldn't afford that loss and still have made the playoffs. So, we were in a precarious position last year where we were weak at running back, and when we had some injuries, they all came at the same time. And 2 of our injured players didn't get put on injured reserve, even though they lost 4 or 5 weeks into the season. So we couldn't pick up somebody. We had to, we were limited in where we could play. That's the unique nature of FPPC. If those players are listed out in typical leagues, you can then pick somebody else up. FPPC is tougher landscape.
It is.
They make you think a little bit more, and they make you work at it. I was used to rookies where I had a taxi squad.
Nope.
And this, you don't have a taxi squad in FPPC, so you have no place to hide somebody.
Nope.
who's not quite ready to take over yet. So it does add to the strategy decisions. And, we were in such a dire strait that we had to pick up two players. We had to pick up a running back and a wide receiver to start, or we would have not had any points from those positions. The guys we picked up had good weeks. So we did okay, but hated losing Tracy. That was a move I wish we had not made, but I don't expect him to be a slam dunk starter this year either for the Giants. So he could be split in time, or they could draft somebody to take over that position. I don't think he's a lock to be getting, I don't think he's a top 15 running back lock for this year. Estime, who I kept over him, Estime was on injured reserve, so we were able to save him until late in the year, and we still have him going into this year. He's got a good shot. Javonte Williams is gone. McLaughlin's still there, but we've got a good shot of seeing Estime as the starter for Denver. That would be great. Then all of a sudden we're in a good situation at running back instead of being a little. The running back's our weakest position, but we still have three guys that are viable starters.
Yep, I like it. Dennis, that was a good deal. Wasn't planning on hitting the dynasty, but that, you started pontificating, so I didn't want to miss our dynasty discussion there. So I thought that was good. I appreciate it's making me think a little bit. So I'll be thoughtful and whatnot. So
and I will remind people, since we're talking about dynasty, if you're rebuilding your team this time of the year, do not trade one asset for one draft pick.
Yeah.
If you are making a trade, somebody wants that player that is on your roster, make them pay two pieces to get him. And I don't care if it's a third round or a fourth round pick, get another chance at a starting player. Obviously, you want it to be a second round pick or a young player that you're rebuilding around, but never trade one for one. That is the epitome of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It will take you forever to rebuild trading one asset for another. And people say, well, I traded an older guy away for a draft pick. Well, that's fine. Get two draft picks. Even if you're trading a good starter, but hey, he's only worth a first round pick and very little more. Get that first round pick and a third round pick, or a third round pick in a future year, a second round pick in a future year. Get a second piece that you can eventually add to the puzzle. Usually, when I'm rebuilding, I look and I say, who is my best player on this team that other teams want? Right now, if I was going into this season again and I had Saquon Barkley on my roster, and I was looking to rebuild, I'd find a team that was willing to give up 3 or 4 pieces for Saquon. And I got a guy after Saquon's rookie season to give me 6 pieces in trade for Saquon Barkley. A couple first round picks, a couple of players, and a couple of future picks. And I was able to rebuild that team in a hurry because I had somebody desperate enough to get Saquon Barkley. And then, of course, sometimes is the bad luck. Saquon suffered through a few injury-plagued seasons, and my draft picks are still performing quite well. So, and ironically, the guy who had Saquon and paid a king's ransom for him, then traded him away pretty cheap for a couple of second round picks a couple of years ago. And now, of course, he's back up to being at the top. And, now he's not even on that guy's team. And that guy's team is in the middle of the pack and staying in the middle of the pack because he trades away his assets. He turns the roster too much and too quick. You got to take that big picture I hate when people go, well, if you're not going to finish top three, then you should rebuild. No, make the playoffs. I've won as many dynasty leagues from the sixth or eighth seed in leagues that have eight playoff spots than I have the number one spot. And you just make the playoffs because you don't know what rosters are going to look like come playoff time. Even strong leagues are going to have some weaknesses by late in the season due to injuries. And if you just skate into the playoffs, but you have prepared yourself for having lots of running backs to lean on late in the year, all of a sudden your running backs emerge and you sweep through the playoffs and win the championship. I did that 2 years in a row in the same league, and it's pissed people off. They're like, why didn't you rebuild? Why didn't you rebuild? Because I knew I could make the playoffs. If I can make the playoffs, I can win your money. And I did 2 years in a row. Going into this season, maybe I will rebuild a little bit, or maybe I'll stand pat. I don't know until I get a chance to look at that team, look at who is drafted by who and where the opportunity is, and see if I've got some advantages where I know. Like last year, Bucky Irving. I love that kid coming out of college. And I knew I could get him with an early second round pick, early to mid second round pick. I was trying to get as many early to mid second round picks as I could so I could get as many shares of Bucky Irving as I could. Even took him with the 14th pick in a 14 team league where I won, and I was drafting from the 14th spot. I took him that early because I really liked him. Turned out pretty good. You're not going to hit on all your draft picks, but the more draft picks you have in a rebuild, the more likely you are to rebuild in a hurry.
Uh, I, I think it's a good thing. I think you are to write uh, an article about what you just said. I think just kind of an over, kind of maybe a hierarchy of rules, quick rules, rules of thumb. Because you got to get deep. I think you start with those rules and then you add your metrics, then you add your logic and patterns. But I think there's a lot of people, Dennis, just need to hear these rules like go get you two pieces kind of thing. Or if I can get in the playoffs, I'm not going to rebuild, mostly. That kind of thing. I think just your rules of thumb, just bullet points with a little bit of discussion would be a nice article that people could start with and then look at the next level, right? The deeper plays, right? Using metrics and patterns but you got to start somewhere. You got to have the frame around the picture. And what I've seen, myself included, Dennis, is I didn't even know the rules of thumb. And I've learned them listening to you over the years. I think if I started again, if uh, we if uh, we went to war and they drafted you for the military radio, then if I was by myself, I think I could, I think I could, I think I could start my own dynasty team now. I think I'd have a lot more than I did before you helped me because I made a lot of mistakes that I didn't even know were mistakes. That's bad. That's how bad it was, Dennis. As I look back and I've heard what you've said over the last 3, 4 years, I realized, man, I just shredded all shots I had. And I'm just, I would do it better now. Maybe not perfect, but I'd do it better. I think you ought to do your rules of thumb.
Almost like a dynasty manifesto.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
I do think I think there are a lot of people that are intimidated by playing dynasty fantasy
Well,
football.
I was.
And
I
and
didn't know what I
yes,
was doing.
and yes, you can make a lot of bad mistakes along the way. Um, but I think sometimes you need to have some patience. It's not something that we're good at
Yeah.
because we play a lot of, redraft where we're used to churning 40% of our roster
Yes.
in a year. The
Yes.
way Dynasty is built in most league settings,
Hmm.
you've got space where you can stash players.
Yeah.
FPPC, we don't have that luxury.
No.
So FPPC is a special
I
dynasty
think if
animal.
I was doing over, I was debating as you were just talking, I was saying, maybe I should have started with like Best Ball Dynasty or like a ESPN or something a little bit easier, maybe a 10 league dynasty or with taxi or, give myself a lot more opportunities to goof up and still be in, competitive because I jumped right into FFPC, Dennis, and I got shredded. I really did.
It's well, but you had a good core of a team, and we were able to rebuild that in a hurry.
Yeah, but
And it really didn't take long to rebuild in
no,
cash,
and I
and
was
we've
proud of
cashed two
that.
years in a row.
Yeah, but
But but
I
but it
just
is.
didn't have the cherry on the top kind of thing that you bring, you know,
Well,
the
I
bring it
appreciate
home kind of thing. I didn't
yeah.
have that. I couldn't bring it home.
Well, I appreciate that.
You have
My
taken me to the next level. And it would be nice if we ever ran across somebody who plays $1,000 dynasty, you know, a hot shot that could educate us a little
oh
bit.
yeah,
It
yeah.
would be nice. I don't know if that's people are out there that do that kind of thing, but
Well, the interesting thing is there are some really good players in Dynasty that I've run up against
yeah.
in leagues,
Uh,
and some of them don't provide any, like they're not on any website. They're not
well, they don't talk about it, but
sharing their expertise, but I've actually bugged them
yeah,
and
I
asked them a
would.
few questions
Yeah.
because and I've learned by watching them too, because that's the thing is if you watch a great poker player or you watch a great golfer and how they go about attacking the game,
Hmm.
or a great basketball player, whatever, if you've got somebody who really has good habits of how to get the most out of that game and you just watch, you will learn you will get an education in a hurry. And in Dynasty, I've played against a couple of those guys. A guy by the name of Mike goes by the name Mike NFL.
Yeah.
Been playing Dynasty. He's the commissioner in one of my oldest Dynasty league, my
Right.
absolute oldest one, which is a free league. And that's actually how you learn is you
Yeah.
don't start
I would
spending
have
money.
started free league. Yeah, I
but
should have did that. Hmm.
Paulie's Sleepers is another guy who is really good. Neither of them are current writers
Yeah.
for any website that I'm aware of, but they're both very good dynasty players. Um, Ryan Kennedy, who we see over on Twitter all the
Yeah.
time, he's really good at dynasty. Uh, but there's a few of them that I could name off that are just really excellent players that I watch the way they execute their their strategies, and again, it helps that I'm a pattern guy. I can read their patterns, I can see their moves, and I can learn from them. Sometimes it just looks like mishmash to everybody. They're not seeing the big picture of what they're doing. And there's the thing in Dynasty that is so good and why I like playing that format is there's more than one way to win, and that's true in any type of fantasy football. But, if you have a bad draft in redraft, okay, you do a bad job on the draft, you're putting yourself in a hole. Doesn't mean you can't dig out and win the championship. that year, but you put yourself in a hole if you have a bad draft. And in Dynasty, if I have a bad draft, I instantly go into rebuild mode. It's that simple if I deem that I've had a bad draft. And you know it pretty much when you see it, when you look at your team and you're going, what the hell was I thinking? Um, but in Dynasty, there are the wheeler dealers and there's the incremental change artists. I'm more of an incremental change artist than a real wheeler dealer. I don't, I enjoy the art of the trade, but I don't need to make 5 trades to make me happy. I want to win the league. And that's my ultimate goal is to win. I don't play fantasy football based on trading away, trade high, on a player. I don't care. If I miss trading high on a player, too bad. I'll hope he cycles back up to being really good again. In the meantime, I'll use him selectively in games to help me win money. That's what I'm playing for. I'm not playing to have the prettiest looking team. I'm playing to have a team that will do well at the end of a football season when injuries are killing the lineup. So that's kind of how I play different than other people. But as we've seen in redraft, if you have a different strategy than the consensus, it's easier to beat the consensus. And that's what I've found in Dynasty as well.
Dennis, I think we ought to start the show.
I think so.
Okay.
Here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? Well, if you use statistics the way a good scientist uses statistics to guide you to the answer, not just support an idea that you might have, you are going to be a smarter fantasy football player. That is guaranteed because fantasy football is a statistics driven game. And joining me as he does each and every week. And hey, folks, we are still getting together, still during this learning season and this research season, because fantasy football never goes away. He is the professor. He's the fantasy professor. He's a real professor emeritus. It's John Bush. John, it is combine time, and Twitter is going crazy with so many proclamations of who the next superstar will be.
I've just seen Twitter, some of the 40-yard dashes and these kind of things. And I'm relying on you to find those secret players that I will be drafting late in redraft come August. And, that's what I'm letting you apply your expertise, because I don't have any with, because they all look good to me. These are all people that if I was their age, if I could just, get out of bed without flopping over, I'd done well for the day, right? Shake off the hangover and whatnot. So these are amazing people that are in shape and are, very driven. And, it took me a while to catch on to all that. And so it's, I'm letting you tell me about it. The only thing, and I was just going to ask about your opinion, it seems to me some well-regarded players are not really doing anything at the combine this year. Is that typical? I don't remember. I guess I'll say it seems this year there's a lot more of that. It's just like, hey, I'm going to show up, but I'm not going to answer any big questions or, perform for you guys, that kind of thing. Is that just usual, or is this a funny year for a lot of good players not really showing off?
I think it has sort of peaked this year versus what
Okay.
we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, but it's been trending this way.
It's been
And
trending. Okay.
in my opinion, if you look back a number of years in the combine, I can remember some guys that, you know, they quote unquote hurt their stock by underperforming in
Hmm.
um, some of the drills. And I don't really care about 40-yard dashes as
Hmm.
much as I care about some of the other on field drills.
Hmm.
Um, but if you are already considered to be like one of the top 4 or 5 guys at your position,
Hmm.
if I was your agent,
Hmm.
I'd probably tell you don't run the drills
Hmm.
because there's nowhere to go but down. Like the
I see.
guys that the guys that are going to benefit most from the combine are the guys that were borderline first day draft picks
Hmm.
or borderline first and second day draft picks, meaning first 3 round guys
Hmm.
that want to move up. And,
Hmm.
if you were given a projection of like early second round
Hmm.
and you have a great combine, you're probably going to jump into the first round and maybe as high as the top 20 picks. And that's your goal in life, is to be in those first 20 picks.
Hmm.
But if you are Ashton Giante, you
Right.
just, you are all world. And, a lot of folks are mad that you didn't win the Heisman Trophy and all that stuff. The only thing that can happen to you in the combine are bad things. I
Hmm.
mean, it's possible you could get hurt, first of all, then you're really in big trouble. But if you just are not a great track and field runner, like that's why I don't worry about the 40s too much on guys. I won't, if a guy runs like a tight end who ran a 4.65 40 versus a 4.71, it's like that's a blink of an eye. That doesn't bother me. If you are expected to run, you're a wide receiver who's expected to break 4.5 and you come in at 4.6, now all of a sudden you've got a whole different story about your qualifications. But my favorite drill is one that you can't fake because you're either good at it and it shows off how quick your hands are and how well you can run a precise route, or it doesn't. And that's the gauntlet drill. I don't know if you're familiar with that
No,
one.
I'm not. No.
So the gauntlet drill, the player starts out on the sideline and he's facing one of the quarterbacks. They throw him the ball. The minute he catches that ball, he drops it, turns around, and there's another ball right on him. And then he runs a straight line down the field, alternating catches to his left and his right, all the way down the field. There's like 7 balls thrown at him. And of course, you're catching and you're dropping because you got to open your hands up for the next catch. And you know which way you're looking, but this simulates running a route in the NFL where the quarterback's already thrown the ball before you've cut. You got to now pick up where the ball's coming, and it's going to be on you in a hurry. Now, you don't have the simulation of a defender to deal with, but do you have hands? Can you get your hands out away from your body, make good catches with the ball because you want to catch that ball and bring it in. And in this case, you don't have time to really bring it in because you got another ball on top of you. So it's a great judge of your hands, but it's also a great judge of how balanced a player is. Because if you're changing from the left to the right all the time, you tend to run a wigwam across the field instead of a straight line.
Mhm.
Or some of the guys just fall. They
Now,
just
Dennis, when you described it, and I heard the word catch and drop, I'm like, yeah, that's not good, is it? But
well,
you see what I'm saying? okay, I'm
You got to have it
drafting
secure. You
a
got to have it
guy
secure.
that drops balls. I mean,
Well,
every week in the redraft we go crazy on Twitter. How many? Yeah, I would have won except, or I had that parlay except he dropped the ball. So
the
is
the big
are
difference,
yeah, yeah,
the big,
but you see what I'm saying? It's like, hold it
absolutely,
now. We're
yeah.
happy they're dropping the ball. That's
Well, only
weird.
only if they really had it in their hands. Like
But you see what I'm saying?
you can
That
tell if they
doesn't sound
bobble.
good.
Oh, it is kind of you're
A
training the guy for a task that he's not going to do the rest of the year
Yeah,
because
that I
he's going
guess
to grab the ball and pull it in.
right. And
But
keep it.
you can tell when they're running it. Like if they're not sure-handed,
Yeah. You can tell.
they don't have
Dennis,
time to
I
get rid of
want
the
their
ball.
paws
Yeah.
to be with that stickum on there, and I don't want that ball leaving those
No,
hands.
no, but you can tell if they're
Okay,
discarding
okay.
it on
Oh,
purpose
that's
or
a
whether
very
it's
funny.
bouncing in and out. Yeah.
It would be like judging quarterbacks for overthrowing people,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
everybody'd be happy. It's like, are
Yeah.
y'all missing something?
Yeah.
I'm
And the
not
other
happy.
the other drills I love when they do like either the wheel route for the running backs
Mm-hmm.
or they do the longer routes for the
Mm-hmm.
receivers. And if they are ahead of where the ball ends up, like if they have to slow down to catch the ball because the quarterbacks that they're bringing in are
Mm-hmm.
they're not the quarterbacks that are going in the draft. Okay, they're
Yeah.
just extra quarterbacks. They're told to throw into a spot,
Yeah.
and if that receiver had to wait for the ball to get there, that's a pretty good sign that the guy's got some giddy up off the line.
Yeah.
But I love that gauntlet because it just shows
Okay.
balance and it shows hand coordination.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were some guys at the tight end position. The running backs and wide receivers will run today, Saturday, March the 1st. They'll have theirs today. So we haven't gotten to see them yet. The tight ends we did. And one of the guys that everybody's talking about is Bowling Green's Harold Fannin Jr. at tight end.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is supposed to be the big guy coming out of at the tight end position, other than Tyler Warren from Penn State, who skipped the workouts,
Mm-hmm.
who will probably be the first tight end taken.
Mm-hmm.
But Harold Fannin Jr. knows he's got a shot at moving up from a second round or a third round pick to the first round, late, or at least move up in the second if he has a good performance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they expected him to run about a 4.66
Mm-hmm.
in the 40. His best was a 4.71.
Mm-hmm. So that's bad.
They do a blocking sled drill with tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't push a blocking sled straight.
Mm-hmm.
The blocking sled actually looked like it beat him on the block. He was all over the place. That thing turned on him and he was just chasing it. And before you knew it, he was outrunning the blocking sled. Horrible job. In the gauntlet drill, he dropped like 3 of the 7 passes,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't stay on the straight line. And so I didn't like the way he ran very well. There's a kid out of South Carolina that I watched in a couple of games, and so he's got actual game skills,
Mm-hmm.
but he has not been highly touted. Joshua Simon, he ran a 4.65, which was 2/100ths off the best time of the day,
Mm-hmm.
and looked great in the gauntlet drill as well. And he also had to like hold up to wait for the ball to get to him. When it came right down to his play. So he was one that I really thought, wow, this kid's got some skills. There's another guy out of UCLA that may not even get drafted,
Mm-hmm.
but in leagues where I can put a guy on a taxi squad,
Mm-hmm.
there's a guy from UCLA, Moliki Maraveo, that looked fabulous. He only ran a 4.81 40, so he's not a burner come to speed, but he is a strong kid who is probably going to land on a roster. He actually looked pretty darn good. The other tight end that I kind of liked was a guy out of Syracuse, Aronde Gadsden. Um, he looked really good in the gauntlet drill as well. So those are the guys that sort of impressed me a little bit,
Mhm.
but I don't get too excited about the combine. It points out the guys that I should keep an eye on where they land.
Mhm.
So what I do every year is I keep a pad and paper, and if I see somebody impressive in the gauntlet, I write their name down. A couple of years ago, one of those names was Puka Nakua.
Nice.
He ran probably the best gauntlet I've ever seen, and I've only been watching the combine for about 6 years, but he was fabulous. He looked great, and I was like, "Who is this guy? He is big. He's quick. You know, not fast, super fast burner of speed for the 40, but he's quick. He's got great hands, good agility. Okay, I'm going to keep an eye on this guy." So I write these names down. There's only two names that made it out of the tight ends, and that was Gadsden and Simon. Neither one of them is going to be a first or second round draft pick, I don't think. But where they'll be a late round pick for me in some dynasty leagues. None of the tight ends, and that includes Tyler Warren, who is really a good looking player out of Penn State. None of the players at tight end are going to be guys that I'll even consider in redraft.
Mhm.
And I probably won't take where they're going in dynasty right now, because I don't think that they're going to be all that strong. The other guy at tight end that sort of intrigued me,
Mhm.
because I kind of liked the way he looked. I know he's had a lot of injury problems
Mhm.
in college, but he's from Iowa. Luke Lachey. He looked really good out there as well. But the two guys that caught my attention were Joshua Simon and Gadsden, because they looked like they should be NFL tight ends. And Simon's actually a little slighter built tight end. And in fantasy football, those are the guys that end up being your producers. So I'm kind of looking at him as being, sort of one of those sleeper picks that you keep an eye on. But again, it'll depend on where he goes in the draft. It'll be depending on which team drafts him. Um, but hey, he ends up with the
Nice.
Chiefs.
Nice.
Ends up with the Chiefs in third round. All of
Chiefs.
a sudden,
Okay.
I'm liking him even more. But
Okay.
again,
Okay.
it's all about landing position. But
Right. And we're
but
still a while before the drafts in May, right?
correct. Well,
Yeah.
the draft is in eight. Well,
A,
the draft
end of
draft
April.
draft for the NFL is April 24th.
So
It's the
end of
start of
April.
it.
Okay.
So
So we're
end of
still
April.
yeah.
Long time.
Yeah, I'm
Long time to
probably
go.
not even going to think about best ball till probably early June. I'll do a $5. FFPC has these $5 slim.
Yep.
I'll do some of those, and we'll see how it goes. Last year, just to recap, I did best. I did an experiment, early quarterback, mid quarterback, and then late. And I was really like 5 or 6 out of 10. I was first to third in the late quarterback because a lot of them I had Baker and
Yep.
whatnot. So I think I did win 1 out of 10 uh, with the early, but I'm thinking this year I'm going to skip the mid rounds and continue my early versus late, kind of the barbell approach, Dennis. So I think I'm going to do 15 early, 15 late of 30, probably June in July, maybe into early August. So I'm going to continue my uh, journey, but with the quarterbacks. And then I think by 2026, I'll have a pretty good idea of where I need to be. And then I'll start experimenting with, you know, running backs or what. I'll be doing another series of tests over a couple of years. The only thing about fantasy from a stat point of view is the small numbers. I need like about 10 years compressed into one so I could get 100 samples versus, get 10 this year, 10 next. 10. I'm old and tired by the time I get some answers. So it is tough that way. And a lot of people, if you're not used to doing research and sampling, that you don't even realize, they'll take two or three uh, leagues and make a conclusion out of it, Dennis. And that's, if they listen to us, we're doing years upon years of testing. So I think that's where I'm going. But just that reminded me, and just to fast forward on my data we're going to talk about. I got some more interesting stuff on tight ends. So you mentioned tight ends. I've got some research that you haven't seen on tight ends. So that's coming here in the next couple minutes. Whenever, if you want to go to that, or if you've got something, then
Yeah,
now's your time to speak.
the only time or only other thing I'm going to add is don't get too carried away yet, folks. We are
Uh-oh.
going to see some really, really important players change teams. And then we're going to
Yes.
see guys stay with teams that are going to be sort of the first domino. And the first domino already fell because it looks more and more
Yeah.
like Matthew Stafford's going back to the Rams. They're going to say, okay, we're all in on you for the next 2 or 3 years. And we're going to build around you at the quarterback position instead of retooling. And that's good news for Puka Nacua. That's good news for Kyron Williams. I'm not worried about Blake Corum taking over for Kyron Williams. Will he break into his volume a little bit? Yeah. In some instances, maybe I want to have both of them on the team, depending on where they come in ADP. But having a good, solid quarterback, and Stafford's not a world beater at quarterback anymore, in my opinion. But in real football terms, he's a solid quarterback that you can win with in this league. And so them going all in on saying we're sticking with Stafford, that changes the outlook for a couple of teams that were looking to pick up Stafford. So all of a sudden, now one of those teams might be in the draft grabbing a quarterback. I'm not so sure that anybody coming out of this draft, I'm fearful that their upside might be a Daniel Jones type level of play. And that's not an insult, folks, because Daniel Jones is an NFL quarterback and had made it to that second contract. But he's not going to ever be confused with a top 10 quarterback. But that's where this class could be. I'm thinking that maybe Michael Penix and Bo Nix and even Drake May will all be better than any quarterback coming out in this draft this year. And that's the reality, that some years you don't have a deep quarterback base. So the free agency moves and the trades, where's Sam Darnold going to end up? Who's going to end up with who? Who's going to retool with an old time quarterback that's been around? And does anybody grab Rodgers? Those are the decisions that will be made going forward. And speaking of Aaron Rodgers, all of a sudden that 203 that we have in our FPPC Dynasty League is looking pretty good, because that's what we traded for last year when we traded Aaron Rodgers away. We got a second round pick coming up in this draft which will end up being the third pick in the draft in the second round. So the
Nice.
15th pick overall we got for an aging Aaron Rodgers. I'm not too unhappy with that move.
That was a good move.
But the
Excellent.
running backs, wide receivers, I'll be paying attention to them in the combine this weekend, and quarterbacks too. But I don't bring a lot out of the combine at quarterback usually. If you look horrible at the combine at quarterback, that's going to really be looking bad. The things that you do in the combine at quarterback, you can rehearse a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I like the gauntlet is it's hard to replicate that in practice before you go into the combine, because those quarterbacks it's the key of what 7 or 8 or 10 quarterbacks are going to be rotating through for that gauntlet. Those aren't guys you can bring to your practice. So you have to look good with some bad passes thrown at you. And that's the big key. But tight ends in the book, and you have more tight end data. So let's dive into the veterans.
I just shared the screen, the video people. Y'all can check this out. Just to let you know, we had a pre-show, and Dennis gave us his manifesto for Dynasty, and there were lots of good nuggets. And I've bring a lot of weak sauce to this Dynasty partnership. I'm getting better, but Dennis adds that nice cayenne pepper to the gumbo there of our Dynasty, and he got us to second place, and I'm so proud to have watched him rebuild my mess into something that, we're competitive. And that's what I like. That's what, Dennis, that's what you've brought to me, is I feel like every year we're going to be competitive. And previous to you basically taking over my dynasty team, I never had that feeling. I was just like, well, maybe I'll stumble my way into something versus, we got a shot here. And so it's been very enjoyable. So I do again publicly thank you for getting us to second place. We were third, I guess, the year before. So it's been really nice the last 2 years. That's been a treat. And so now with all the metrics we're testing and building and whatnot, I think we're just going to get better. And maybe in a year or two or down the road, I don't know, this year if we get bored, maybe we should try another dynasty. Maybe not this year. I really would like to have some more of our test metrics, but what I'm going to talk about today, and I've been talking about previous shows, the last probably about 4 weeks, has been the Bush figure that Dennis called it. And where I'm at this year is I took my principal component analysis technique and took what I've been doing and expanded it and found that looking weekly, I divided weekly performances into fourths, right? Four pieces of the pie. And when you do linear regression, it looks like the fourth piece is an extreme negative, Dennis. And I've talked about that before. And let me show you again to remind people. Uh, I'm looking at the week production from and this is uh, quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, and kickers. So 5 different positions weekly. And in this case, looking at tight ends, first to 48th, 49th to 96, 97th to 144. So you're getting pretty weak there, 145 and worse. And what the principal component analysis was showing, Dennis, if you're finishing way back here, it's killing You are getting hurt by that. And the equation was a minus 0.9, and the first to 48th, which is good, is a plus basically 0.6. So you were getting hurt more by sucking than you were by doing really good. So that model is implying in some ways it's almost an inverse. And I just wondered, is that telling us more information? We could retool this to the Bush suck factor and just look at this selection and just say, we're looking for the players that suck the least each week. So I don't know right now. I put them all together, and where I'm at on the data is right here. You haven't seen this, Dennis, but I looked in the top 25% from 2024, the slice method, which is the top 1 to 48. So basically, it's all good. That's the all good players. George Kittle was number one. He scaled at 100. Bride was 82. Look at that drop. And then the next drop,
Wow.
Jonnu Smith at 70. But then we starting to see a big group here. Njoku, Brock Bowers, Kelsey, Andrews, and so forth. And then I put the negative part of the equation in, and I looked at the top 25, and you can see that it brought up somebody like Evan Ingram, figured in at 89, so he would be the third best. But I sorted by just the slice method. But so that tells me Evan Ingram didn't hurt you. That's what this data is telling you. He may not have been the best at the top 48, but he wasn't putting the dagger in your heart each week. So he was more balanced in some ways. So I think you're getting a balanced look at some of the players versus an optimistic look with the slice. And again, folks, I'm still testing, so it's hard to to guess. But I did. If you look at that and look at Kelsey with the negative 38, Dennis, he was killing you some
Wow.
weeks. He did well, top six in positive, but if you added the negative slice, oh boy, he was hurting you. Andrews, on the other hand, he didn't give you a lot of negative. He was at 80, and that's pretty good. But then look at Kate Otten at a 40. Look at Hawkinson. He was pretty good, but boy, he was killing you. So now we could judge each player in an optimistic way. And you do this with your MVP and your best. You kind of balance, the all good versus some of the bad and some of your metrics. So I think you and I, that's a general rule. And this is the Bush figure now with these two variants allows us to get a kind of say a landscape view of the player. Like we get his best, but the downside. And Kelsey really gave us some downside. Otten and Hawkinson, they did pretty good on the upside, but on the downside. So they would have been better probably for best ball, having that profile. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Versus some that were more balanced, like Byers, Njoku, Smith or McBride or Kittle was probably good in redraft as well as best ball, that kind of thing. And so Evan Ingram might have been pretty good at best ball last year, whereas, I don't know. I'm just trying to, this is the data, Dennis. So I'm going to stop right here and let you tell me what you're thinking about this way of looking at it. And I'm going to look at all the positions this way, Dennis, not just tight ends. I'm going to look at all of them. We'll have both views of the tight end. So I'm going to have the split view, one eye going in one direction, one going the other. Look like Marty Feldman.
And I do like this comparison of because a really bad week will cost you. We look at the positive, and that's always a good thing to look at the positive things that happen, and you look at the upside potential of a player. That's very important, but you have to look at that weekly downside as well, because a player that hurts you on a given week, sometimes that's hard to compensate for, and especially at tight end, because if you are drafting typically in tight end, we're looking for the elite advantage, right? There's very few guys above that box. The whiskers are more pronounced above the box at tight end than any other position. So we're trying to go for that advantage. You have to pay for it in the draft. So if you had to pay up to get a tight end, you don't want him giving you 3 or 4 really bad weeks. You want his bad weeks to be equal to what the rest of the tight end group is doing. You don't, you want 6, 7 points to be his worst week. You do not want a 0 or 2, for instance. Those will bury you when you are expecting elite performance out of your tight end. And the most consistent tight end over the last 2 seasons by any metric that I judge, it's Trey McBride. And he scores incredibly well on both of your metrics. But look at the metric when you look at the bad games.
Oh, he's great.
He has Kittle. No bad games. He's right up there with Kittle.
Yep.
That's the same tier, folks, versus when you remove the worst weeks, and you only look at the upside, Kittle's a full tier ahead.
Yeah.
18 points when you grade it from 100 down, and an 18 gap is a tier.
Yes.
And I would say anything over 10 is probably the same tier. Anything within 10, you're in the same tier. 18 is almost 2 tiers dropped. But when you look at the bad, you look at both the good and the bad,
he comes right in there.
Almost identical. And that's why.
And again, we look at ADP, either one, but unfortunately, Dennis, I think you're going to pay for both those guys this year.
Yes.
And so then we're left with trying to find, I think Bowers will be number 3. What do you think?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to guess. Kittle, McBride, Bowers, or Kittle, Bowers, McBride. What do you think? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, the good news right now is that if you look at the current state of where we are, and I mean, the early drafts, the crazy people that are doing the early drafts, that's one way of looking at it. But you look at the rankings, and if you look at a consensus rating of some of the top people in fantasy football, and you right now can get Trey McBride as the tight end 4 at an ADP of 49th in the draft.
Boy, I wish. Probably not in a tight end premium, Dennis. He'll go in the second round.
Tight end premium, he'll go much higher. But what I'm saying is, in a regular draft, regular PPR draft right now, the way he's being rated as the tight end 4.
Wow.
And my contention is that he should be tight end 1 right now.
I think he is in that discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can get the tight end
1 for a 4th price.
For a tight end 4. And as you drop at tight end, you really drop a lot of positions.
And remember, Dennis, if we look at the overall position, you're not getting a linear. This is the slice method, which is exponential. And even when we add the bad games, it's a little bit linear, but early the early group is still exponential, but it does smooth it out late. And that's why why do you show all this? People don't want, when I show them the data, they don't want to see this. Just give me the fire. I don't want to worry about this. But when I look at landscapes and the big picture, Dennis, this is part of how I try to view things. And I know you benefit when I bring the whiskers in and the
Oh
boxes
yeah. Yep.
and when I look at that, when you look at that, and this is that group that is 1 to 48 that at least had 1 week or more in the top 48, and if you look at their distribution, you could see that top whisker versus the bottom. It is so skewed to the bottom that the top whisker is so rare. And look at even the outliers. There's 5 or 6 outliers there. There's just a lot of goodness at the elite. This is telling you, the data is telling you that these elite guys at around zero point 0.5 with this looking, it is so good that you own the position if you can grab one of these. And I think what Dennis is trying to say is McBride has an opportunity to be, and Kittle has an opportunity to
Yeah.
be up there at the top. I think Bowers could be third. I don't know about that yet, but the safe tier is McBride, Kittle. But if I can get a first with a fourth, that sounds pretty good to me, Dennis.
Yeah, and I'll expand that because right now, I mean, again, it's March the 1st.
Yeah,
ADP is going to be a lot different in
yeah,
June and July when we are drafting.
yeah.
But if I can get Trey McBride as the tight end 4,
Mhm.
and I can get him in the 3rd round or later
Yeah,
in tight end premium, I'm grabbing that all day.
yeah.
Right now, Hawkinson is tight end 6.
Hmm.
I'd expect him to have a shot at that top 3.
Hmm.
David Njoku is coming in as tight end 8. I think he's got a shot at being in the top 5. Jonnu Smith is tight end 7. I think that's pretty close to where he should finish.
Man.
How about this? Right now, March the 1st, Kelsey rated as tight end 11.
That's interesting.
If I can get Kelsey in that tight end 11 is going to translate to like 10th round.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can get Kelsey in the 7th round, and I have not filled that tight end position, especially in tight end premium, I'm grabbing that all day. Dallas Goedert is sneaking in as tight end 14 right now. Those are guys that, again, long way to go before ADP will be determined. I think that tight end 4 is going to hold for McBride. And I like that situation because Kittle had the sweet spot of all of his wide receivers having issues in the same year. Debo wasn't Debo, and Ayuk missed most of the season. Laporta is a guy that will be highly ranked, but I look at I think he's ranked higher. He's tight end 3 ranking right now.
Mm-mm.
In my book, he's a
Mm-mm.
7 or 8 is where he should be.
Yeah.
And it's only likely to get a little worse because they figured out how to use Jameson Williams last year.
Yeah.
They've got Jamar Gibbs, who's really good, coming out of the backfield. And again, this doesn't mean I think that Laporta is a bad player. It's just he's not the tight end 3 right now. I think he's closer to tight end 5 as his upside.
That's a little aggressive.
5 is his upside. 8 is where I would have him.
Yeah. My early thinking is Ingram is going to be somebody, and Goddard, he gets a 52. That's about 11th or 10th or 8th, maybe. See, 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9. Those two, I mean, I could put a Goddard and Ingram as a streamer. And if I could grab a Kelsey with one of those in best ball, you see what I'm saying? I think you got some upside there with the Kelsey, and you got Ingram more of the safe. My 89 says he doesn't give you a lot of bad games, and Goddard. I mean, that's how I'm looking right now. If I can't get a McBride with some of those, if I miss that, then I'm thinking streaming in best ball. So I'm starting to kind of think about that. And I do want to look at my com data, and I do want to look at our overall rankings before I make, because we got 6 or 7 ways to look at this, and I want to see the whole picture. But just right now, if I was stuck on a desert island with all these rankings, that's kind of how I'd be thinking about right now. Just starting to juggle value a little bit early. I'm not doing any best balls or anything till June, folks. So at $5. Okay, I'm not betting $1,000 best ball league.
Yeah,
I guess
and I
those
look
are
at
out there. Yeah.
and when I look at these rankings and I look at, the projected rankings right now, and Brock Bowers number 1, who's going to be throwing on the football? George Kittle, who's he going to be sharing the targets with? Because the wide receiver situation is going to be better next year.
Yeah.
Sam Laporta, did we all of a sudden replace the sun god and Jamison Williams and Jamar Gibbs? Trey McBride has only right now Marvin Harrison Jr. to contend with for targets.
And he could get better.
Oh yeah, he will. He will. But the key is, I think even if he gets better.
So McBride will be the second target in that.
Correct. And I just look at Trey McBride, and he had 1 receiving touchdown all season.
So you figure he'll catch a few more this year.
I think he's good for a half dozen touchdowns instead of 2. He had 2. He had 1 rushing and 1 receiving touchdown all year. I think he's good for 6 to 8 next season. So that jumps him up in the rankings. And again, Hawkinson, full year back from an injury. I think he's back into the discussion of that elite group. And then after those guys, then I look at the Njokus, and I look at where Kelsey is ranked right now at 11. I think Kelsey's worst case is 6. So if you can get him closer to, after 6, I'm looking at that being his worst case. You're right about Evan Ingram. If he plays, I like his chances. So we'll be watching preseason we'll be watching the lead up to the start of training camp. Does he show up? Does he retire? Does he play? Is he healthy? If he is a great sleeper pick, because he accomplished what you're seeing on your chart there last year with a hodgepodge of quarterbacks, because he didn't have Trevor Lawrence most of the year.
No, he was number 3 if you added the penalty of sucking, the suck penalty. He did well.
Yeah, and he's the guy that great rates in as tight end 10 on all of my metrics, and he's just a solid guy. Like he's going to be cheap in the drafts, and he's going to be a solid guy if he plays. And those are the kinds of guys. If I can't get the ultimate elite this year, and my ultimate elite is going to be Trey McBride. If I miss on Trey McBride, then it's Hawkinson, Njoku, Kelsey, Ingram. And again, that's assuming Ingram plays. It's a possibility he could retire. He's going to enter his age 31 season coming back from an injury, from a series of injuries that he's had. And then Goddard is a guy that is in reserve after that. So that's the strategy that I'm going to probably employ at tight end. The names might be different, but the concept's going to be the same. I'm going to have my elite guy. He's going to be the lowest ranked of the elite guys. If I can get him at a decent price, that's my guy. If I miss on him, then it's Andrews, Hawkinson, Njoku, Kelsey, Ingram, Goddard. Those are the next guys that I target and at different times in the draft. And if I miss on one, then I go to the next one. But the idea is I'll be much later on tight end if I miss out on McBride, and I'm okay with that. But that's my strategy. I'm probably avoiding. I'm not paying the Brock Bowers premium, even though he's a hell of a ball player. I expect a drop in the stats from Kittle this year. And Sam Laporta, I'm not sold on. He's a very good, real football player. He's very streaky when it comes to fantasy football. So I'm not so sure I want a really streaky guy at tight end 3. At tight end 3 or 4, I want a guy who is bulletproof. And I don't see that in Laporta.
So what you hadn't seen here, I added years of experience. So rookies is year 1 all the way to year 11. And so this is in the database. This is the next is the number of tight ends that had at least 1 year. And you can see all the way down to 11th. Kelsey. So 1. And so percentage of players starts to get, it's really interesting to see the attrition, right? The survivors as we go over time. And then I took each year experience and took the average and minus 0.6. That's not good. But you can see Kelsey is, so impact wise, it's not, lots of players and the average is sucky. And notice you start getting a higher impact. And so what happens is the survivors are getting better, Dennis. And that's not surprising because you're weeding out the weak. And so if you follow the chart this way, it looks like about year 7, and then we start dropping, and then we get 3 and 1. So I'm not sure how real that is. But if you throw those two, extremes out of 10, 11 years in the league, it looks like in some ways the survivors and the average that they're producing is peaking at year 7. So it's another way to get this age thing. People like numerical age. I like to look at age, and I've done that work, but I like years of experience. And so I'm thinking for Dynasty that we start seeing some decline after 7. So if you're in Dynasty and you've got a 6-year experience tied in, maybe you start thinking, can you sell high here? Because the data might imply you're starting to kind of hit that plateau or going down. So, and here's the rookie. They get better, keep getting better. Year 4, then they start, maybe year 7, there's not as much. In other words, if you look at the slope, it slows down after year 4, but there's a nice bump, from year 1 to year 4 as far as the overall average in that each experience group here, Dennis. What you think about this data?
Yeah, when I look at this, and again,
by the way, nobody's doing this,
right away.
Dennis. You ever seen anybody telling you that?
No.
Come on, folks.
No, because we always hear tight ends take a while to develop, but nobody shows you the math to show you that that's true. And in this case, I look at years 4 through 8 as
Yeah.
basically being the same. Okay.
You could say that.
Because year 4 is more advantageous than year 8 because you've got a couple more years
Yeah.
of gain
Value. I
in
guess
you.
dynasty value. If we rated dynasty
Correct.
value, put that in somehow into the equation.
Yeah. And once you get past year 8, your value drops off and then it gets uncertain because
Yes,
once you have only a couple of data points,
Dennis, this
I
is,
don't trust the data.
we're talking 3-1.
Yeah,
So
I
you're
want
even at
10.
9, 10.
Yeah, I want 10 or more data points
Yeah.
to make any reasonable conclusion in fantasy football. And yes, I know earlier in the show, I was talking, or actually in the pre-show, I was talking about the concept of a best 6-game MVP index.
Mm-hmm.
That number is only compared to other best 6-game values. It is not compared to somebody else's value over the whole season.
Right.
10 data points is my break off of saying, I'm going to believe this data or I'm going to be suspect. I'm going to treat this data as suspect data. So, in other words, if I have a player that has fewer than 10 games, 10 full games played over the last 2 years, I disregard their 2-year MVP average because they have not either stayed healthy or stayed at a starting tier long enough to impress me. And that's, I don't look at that data the same. So when I get past, and I drop off to only 3 data points, then 1 data point, then 1 data point,
Yeah.
I'm not trusting that.
Yeah. Well, it's again, I like to look uh, at the whole landscape, folks. And I know people focus on players. As a biologist, we look at populations and top down. And this is a way for me to consider and think about this. I think this data that and Dennis, I've showed you the age metrics and looked at the stats and things. It's just been more enlightening to go in to drafts kind of with this in your back pocket. I'm not saying this is the overriding factor, but would you feel good, if you're drafting a player that maybe is not going into their ninth or 10th or 11th year, that, they haven't shown anything or they're had an injury, or, there's, in other words, you're starting to really reach towards the end here. And I think on the other hand, a rookie, and you expect some increase to about year 4. So I think the understanding the landscape, and it's called reference class forecasting, it is essential to understand the population, and I just don't see any of that thinking out there in Twitter land, and that's fine. People they want the fire, they don't want to figure out how it got there, and I got that, Dennis. That's why only the elite listeners are listening to us. Thank you, the 1 or 2 that are putting up with Dennis and I. And
One
hopefully
or two thousand,
I don't know,
of
Dennis.
the smartest players. Now,
Yeah,
when I look at this data,
yeah,
Professor, I was all of a sudden reminded of a famous basketball coach by the name of Al McGuire
yeah,
from Marquette, who then became a famous TV
yeah,
commentator
yeah,
covering college basketball. And his favorite statement to make late in the year was, the best part about a freshman is that next year they'll be a sophomore. You look at this chart and the improvement
mm-hmm,
that you get in those by year 4,
yeah,
it gives you hope that if you had a bum that first or second season,
uh,
hang on to that player. Don't get rid of him. He's probably, if he's in a good situation and he's starting, he's probably going to round into form, especially at tight end.
Yeah.
Like tight end seems to be the one position where you really still do have to learn your trade.
Yeah, and so what I did, Dennis, is looked. So this is with the bad games counting against you. This is with the upside only, the slice method. And we start seeing the survivorship concept again is going. Okay. And looking at the average. So if we look, it's a little different. It looks to me, if you look at just upside, that year three
Yeah.
in some ways, and then you might see, like, you're starting to lose a lot of the weaker players year 7 and 8, and again you're starting to see, look at 9, you're starting to see another drop off. So both methods are telling you be cautious about year 9, Dennis. But it's interesting that if you look at this, looks really nice if you give the bad weak penalty here, whereas the upside seems to be capped a year earlier. So I'm trying to figure out how I might use that. If that's real, then maybe what you see in year three is, upside wise, is, for best ball, maybe you play it a little different than redraft. If you look at the weekly penalty versus, the upside, you see what I'm saying? You might get how you play a third year versus a fourth year in best ball versus redraft might be different, Dennis, or dynasty even. I have to think about this. I don't have a firm conclusion. I wanted you to see this data to see there's a little bit of something going on, upside only versus uh, the penalty of the bad weeks thrown in. So there's something happening here, Dennis, that I think, and I'm curious how running backs, think about it. I'm going to give you the running backs, wide receiver, and quarterbacks this same way. I'm going to repeat this, and we're going to see, is this universal or is it position by position? And it's going to be really intriguing, Dennis. We haven't ever seen this before. So this is brand new, hot stuff.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I think there is a big difference in best ball versus in redraft, and it shows up in my data. My upside value data only looks at the best games that players had, looks at the best third of their games over the last 2 years, and the best player when you rank that, you know, you got guys like Sam Laporta who make the top 5 in that, who are outside, more like 8th when
Yeah.
you look at the MVP. So it's very interesting how one set of data will say one thing about a player. And that's where I do think you have to have a different mindset at tight end and quarterback in best ball versus in redraft. In redraft, I don't want those penalty weeks. I don't want those horrible weeks. I don't care if I get a horrible week. I don't care if a guy has a -3 week
Mhm.
in best ball because I'll have some live body on that team that'll score 6 or 7 and keep me in the game. I only care about the upside. And, David Njoku had more of those upside games. You look at his upside value, it's in the top 5, versus he's more like 7th or 8th when you look at MVP. There are these subtle differences that I think you have to look at. Mark Andrews is outside of the top 10 when
Right.
it comes to looking at just his best games, but you look at his MVP and he doesn't have bad games. So he is right in there as a guy that I would want in redraft. But in best ball, maybe I'm passing over him to go with more of the huge upside guys. But this data is again guiding us to see that it's okay from a mathematics standpoint, from a science of fantasy football standpoint,
Yeah.
to have a different opinion in different formats on the same player.
So what I did here was looked at the average, making it into the different slices. So the higher the number, the worse it is. And so again, if you remember, the principal component model seemed to imply the three top slices were nearly about the same if you go back and look at the equation. But the last piece is extremely bad. And you can see this, look at the scale. So the scale wise of even though it's higher, Dennis, that's actually inverse. That's bad. And the scale of finishing the first to the 144th weekly is a lot closer than if you really sucked 145 or worse. It's almost like this is really bad. Death by one deep cut versus smaller cuts down here. So this shows and again, this is years experience. So this is first through there's only one data point here. So you can probably throw that out. But this is that ninth, and uh, you can see, but this just shows you the principal component is saying what this is visually showing, that uh, being really sucky is not good at all. And I plotted that here, and I thought that would be interested to show here. So I did a ratio of the slice 1 to 48 versus the next, and I did the highest versus the third slice, highest versus the fourth, and you can see that the impact here is really crazy. Again, it's dropping down because what's happening, you got a lot of sucky players early in experience and they're gone. And then it's a little bit better, but still tenfold worse. I mean, at 9 years, it's tenfold.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still not good. It's not great. And so I thought that was interesting to show the scale. And so I'm kind of rushing along because I know everybody doesn't want to get into all this. So what this data is showing, Dennis, is I looked at the top uh, 25 percent in the first year experience here. And you can see this is from 2013. So some of these names haven't played in a long time. And some of them maybe just played one or two games. But you can see how things are. And then I looked at their career average. Look at Kelsey and look at his career average. He's the best that's ever been in my data here since 2013. And so what I did is I looked at this top slice of first year experience and asked the question, what was their career outcome? So now I'm looking, does the first year give you insight into their career? It's kind of almost a dynasty metric. And then here's the next slice in their career. The third slice, in other words, they really were. And then here's the worst of the worst, their first year and what their career was. So when I do that and look at and so what I did, 3 or more years of experience. So I threw out everybody that's first or second and never played third or more. So this is career, divided into the fourths, calculated the average of the Bush number, the linear regression, and tested those slices. And again, the lower the number, the better. And we can see the top slice, the next, the next, and the next. And it is significant. And long story short, uh, the top slice versus the second slice. The top slice is better career wise than the third or the fourth. And then the second slice versus the third or the fourth was significant as well. And so we're talking in the 33%, the top 25 versus the next 25, they were 33% better over their career arc. So if you showed up your first year in the top 25%, you had a career arc a third better than anybody else, Dennis, of those
Wow.
guys. Yeah, so this is dynasty data. So I looked at who that might be for recently. Laporta, Bowers, Kincaid, Kraft, Musgrave, and Theo Johnson was a surprise this year. Looking at the first year compared.
Wow.
So these got now, I don't know who, they got to make it to 4 year or more to have, but we got some suspicion here. And I know you had kind of tipped me to Kraft a little bit. You were going to be watching him. I'm saying that the data would suggest that as a group, they're going to be a third better than the other first year picks from the last couple years. So I thought that
Very
was,
interesting.
yeah. And so then I did the second year, same thing. And what I found, you're going to love this, 57%, if you were in the top 25% in your second year compared to everybody else, these guys here, your career arc, 57% better than everybody else,
Wow.
Dennis. That is really significant. And those are these two in their first 2 years, Kraft and Laporta. So doesn't mean Laporta is going to be the best for Kraft, but I think they have value, Dennis. I think Tucker Kraft may be somebody we really need to see a little bit. And so what I did, I looked at 3 years, 63%. If they had 3 years in the top 25%, right here, they were 63% better in their career arc. And we're talking Kittle, uh, these are just all of them that had, 3 years in. So I'm not showing you the first year, but the second and third year. And Fryermuth, Kelsey, of course, had a great career arc, but here were some other names. Ingram, Miller, but 63% of those had a good career arc. And I looked at the two of the three uh, first, second, or third year, and they were two of the three, and I measured that. So two of the three, they were 57%, and I'm looking at year four. So I just want to say, okay, first 3 years, you were two of the three in the top 25. What was your year four? 57% of those players were in the top 25% in year four. And so these are some of the players in the past. So, you can look at, some of them, I don't know, likely is one, uh, and whatnot. So just looking overall at some of that data. So I just wanted to horse through all that. So this would be something people can look at. Dennis, I'm not sure I've decided what all this means yet. I was just running through this data. But again, nobody's ever thought about it. But I thought the one where there were 57% career arc, I thought that was pretty amazing that, the 3 or more years of experience divided in year two. So it looks to me that you can forgive year one, but by year two, if you're in the top 25%, you got a 57% chance your career arc is going to be better than folks that are not in year two, the top 25. So this is a good kind of rule here. I think you got a good shot at finding those dynasty tight ends that should have a nice career arc, you know. And I was surprised that, that number was so high, from year two. So maybe that says something about tight ends, and you really want to pay attention to their success in year two, Dennis, is kind of what I was trying to think about. So I got all the data for the year two players and see who's still playing, and we can see what their, make predictions about their career arc, and whatnot for year two. And, just something to think about. I'll eventually put this in video and we'll put it up, the figures people to look at and pontificate. So I really stepped out of here. And I think for Dynasty, I think there's stuff in here that people need to consider. Again, this is overall, Dennis. It's not individual players. This is probabilities, right? 57 means 43% didn't do well. People forget that. They only want to think the positive. You've got, so it's better than a coin flip, but, it's not a guaranteed either to where you bet, your rent money on the horse to show. They can run out of the money. 43% do, but 57% don't. So I threw a lot at you, Dennis.
Yeah, and here's a case
I did that on purpose here, but you go ahead.
Well, here's a case where if I look at this data, okay,
yeah,
and I'm looking to make a dynasty trade, and I'm looking to add that second piece, because remember, I told you don't trade one for one.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm making a trade and I'm looking to have a throw in. Maybe Theo Johnson is a good throw in this year. Yeah. If I can hit at a 57% rate on a throw in, I'm taking that odds. I'm taking those odds every day. It just
says that he had a better season for a first year guy than you probably thought. That's what got me,
Yeah, and it was an incomplete season, and it was with lousy quarterback play.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, if you get a full season, he learns from year one to year two.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's a much more attractive looking player, and you got him for nothing. Like, you will pick this guy up cheap because everybody's looking at, oh, he didn't do much. Okay, but he really did do better.
He's a taxi guy for sure in Dynasty.
Yeah. That's pretty cool when you could see, okay, not the world beater last year, but he's going to be better year 2, 3, and by the year 4,
yep,
you probably got yourself a really good starter, and you got him cheap. And that's where I do like the way this data looks at stuff, and it says, okay, that's a guy that I'm going to take a look at. And again, as I told you, I think this Bush number will pick up on some players that MVP and upside value miss on. Yep. And that's a good thing.
I'm really wanting to think about Tucker Kraft as well. He looks good, having, pretty good seasons the last 2 years.
Yeah, and Tucker Kraft is a guy that I really do think is a good that good second group of tight ends as far as especially in best ball. Yeah. Because in a redraft situation, there are so many wide receivers competing for those targets, but I like his upside. I like what he can bring to your team on his best weeks, and he's not giving you those really bad weeks. So, and again, you're getting him cheap, and that is the key with players, especially in Dynasty. If I can get a guy thrown in to a deal as the extra piece that I'm asking for. And sometimes you get two extra pieces. You get a third round pick and a throw in player. And again, that's year two for Nico Collins after his rookie season. I got a lot of throw in of him in deals because people were disappointed with his first year. Roma Dunze is a guy who disappointed everybody first year. I wouldn't mind having him as a toss in. So, but at tight end, Tucker Kraft, Theo Johnson, those are two guys that your data says 57%, is for
Well, look at
Kraft.
Trey
That's
McBride.
pretty
I
darn
just
good.
said 3 years, two or more been in the top 25. Year four, he's got a 57% chance
Yeah.
of being in the top 25. So it feels as good. All I can say, that's not 80%, Dennis. So I think that just speaks to the nature of tight ends. And so that's what you're dealing with. And I think just a little scrap of advantage is something you got to go with. Maybe in quarterbacks, it won't be this number, but I don't know yet. But I'll have this. But I like to look at these career arcs, Dennis, across the
Yes.
years.
Yes.
I've been looking and just, going across, looking around, just following where they were last 3 or 4 years. And this is the big, I mean, just look at Kelsey. I mean, that man has done something. And Ingram, take a look. He had 2 down years, but then the last three, he's been back where he was. So, I'm feeling good that he's a target this year, kind of thing. So, uh, I did look at Otten, did have a nice year, but two sucky first years. So I'm going to look at that, but I wasn't sure. Kyle Pitts kind of won, but then two suck and then back. There's some just interesting. And look at Janu, had 3 bad years. And
Wow.
then, the last 5 has had 3 of 5. So that's interesting. You wonder, are you picking up some that are just late bloomers, or it worked, or they finally found the team? Like Miami really unlocked him. And I'm curious to see how all that goes. But anyway, I like to look at this data just to give me a landscape of players. And I think we'll have this for the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the wide receivers, Dennis. And we'll look at that. But I think years of experience is another way. I hope I can have the quarterbacks by next week. We'll see. But anyway, I'll have some data for quarterbacks next week. For sure, I've got the Bush number, slice variant, and the linear regression. So we'll for sure. I've already got that done, and I've got a few more things done. But we'll try to have more of this landscape view as well. And all I say is this is how I approach it, folks. Some of this stuff, Dennis and I just show you what we do. It may be overkill. The thing is with overkill is sometimes you don't know until after you look at everything to decide, yeah, I'm probably not getting a lot out versus what I put in. But this data just seems fascinating to look at career arcs. I'm calling it a career arc view of players. And I don't think people look at it like that. And certainly they don't have this way, with the Bush number and looking at the weekly scoring. And I like career arcs. This is my new thing now. Just peruse. Just look around and hey, what did they do last year? Look at Gersecki, look at Ferguson. Look at Likely. Just it makes you consider. Is there something happening I need to think about a little deeper here? Because remember, people are only looking at last year and probably even the last couple of games, Dennis. What they do last? Oh yeah, I remember they really finished strong. So the concept, the last 2 3 games they finished strong. I know you're doing last 6, but I don't think people even think that that's too far. They want to see the last game or two, or the Super Bowl or whatever. Then they're ready to anoint him as their guy.
Yeah, there's so much overreaction based on a couple of data points,
Yep.
and that is setting yourself up for disaster. And it's also just this idea of the once the consensus grabs onto a player,
Yeah.
it drives his value to an unrealistic level. And even a great player, CJ Stroud is a great real football player, but his value in fantasy football made it all the way up into the top three last season. And all of our metrics said he wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
But it's the eye test of people seeing a couple of good games and expecting they're going to see that all the time. In fantasy football, I want some more reliable data. I want a better track record.
Yep.
Especially the earlier I have to spend on a player in a draft, the more I want a big track record to justify that selection. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Lots of lesson plans waiting for you over there from the professor. Lots of data. Check out my MVP article so you understand the concept. Do you have an idea on how to look at fantasy football data on a weekly basis in an even better way? Well, put it all together and share it with the professor and I, and the professor will actually do a data study on it for you and let you know how it grades out according to the math. And then, of course, head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks. Ooh, ooh. That was
That
good.
is fascinating stuff, Professor, because
career arcs, Dennis.
Career arc, the Bush number, I'm telling you, we're going to have a lot of Bushisms that will have to be defined.
Yeah, and tight ends, I want it to be 80 or 90%, Dennis. I want it to be I want that 1 to 5 shot, the sure thing. And it's, I'm getting about 4 to 5 or even money. You know, uh, and I'm hoping quarterbacks will be more steady and wide receivers. I'm curious about running backs. Their career arc, I
Oh,
bet it's going to be
yes.
shorter.
I think it's going to be very top loaded in the first few years,
Yeah, I'm
and it's going to
curious to
fall off
see how
quickly.
this data is going to, but we'll be able to look at it like that. And again, I think anytime you and I, with our metrics, looking at it, nobody's looking at it like us. And I think that gives us an advantage. Yeah, Theo Johnson got me interested. Tucker Graff got me interested a little bit. I
Theo's a
liked Evan
guy.
Ingram on,
Yep.
that didn't give you any bad games. So I got a lot of, deeper plays for that second or third picks in best ball. I'm starting to think about some of those guys a little bit. And it sounds like from what you told me in the combine, the tight ends, there may not be any secret rookie that a deep play that I need to worry about this year. Sounds
No,
like, yeah,
no, there's no Brock Bowers in this group. There's
yeah,
no even Sam Laporta in this group.
yeah,
Tyler Warren is the only guy that, depending on where he lands, but he's already valued as the tight end 10 before we even know where he lands.
yeah,
That's way too high. There are some players that in this rookie class that are being way overvalued. Ashton Genty
yeah.
hasn't
Have
even,
have you should do an article on that at the
yeah,
right time when they find, after the
yep,
draft.
yep,
And I know you've done that over the years, is kind of look at the early looks and just, kind of see that, maybe through the lens of the opportunity index. I could
yeah,
certainly, think about, expectations of RBs versus tight ends, big difference on career arcs and whatnot. So I'm I'm looking forward to your opinions on some of these deep plays. You need to find me some more Pukas and Bucky Irwins, for my teams, Dennis. Need to find some
Well,
of those
if he
guys.
lands at the right team,
Mhm.
a guy that really intrigues me, and I can't wait to watch him in the combine this afternoon,
Mhm.
Luther Burden.
Mhm.
This guy is tough. Like he looks tough. And he could be tough to take down. Right now, though, the interesting thing is the top rookie wide receiver right now, according to the experts, okay, because I'm grading the average ADP right now based on more experts' rankings than real
Yeah,
drafts.
right.
Tatario McMillan.
Mhm.
And he probably won't be the first wide receiver drafted.
Hmm.
But I think he has the most name recognition now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's a guy by the name of Isaiah Bond who's hitting the board already. Travis Hunter is is getting picked as the WR65, and nobody's really even sure if he'll play, how many snaps he'll play. With the right team, he could be playing both ways. It's fascinating stuff because we've never seen that happen before in football. But the wide receivers are being really undervalued, and I think the running backs, only Gente is the only one that's jumping off the list. Um, I like this guy, Omarion Hampton
Mhm.
is one of the rooks that I like. Trevion Henderson is another, but both of those are outside the top 32 right now at running back.
So when you say like, you know, it would be nice if we could have the Dennis like number, the Dennis like factor. I know you're going to do opportunity, but it would be nice to start grading it out, Dennis. I think you would learn a lot on
Yeah,
yourself if you
yes,
handicap
yes,
if you had 3 or 4 years and just kind of wrote your opinion down maybe after the combine, just some free notes and just kind of 1 to 10. Just I mean, so what if you're wrong, Dennis? Nobody's gonna,
yeah, yep,
just for you and I, just and our listeners, just it would be nice. I could, once we had that data, I could grade you. You know, I'll put you to the professor test, like Dennis. Your average, your average Bush number for your well liked first year was this. It would be, I think it'd be worth the time. You've got enough experience and your play by play eyes. I know you frisbee and NASCAR and basketball and things, but that gives you just those neuron connections, putting it all together. It's you'd probably, if you graded yourself on the horse's appearance, they
yeah,
do that.
yes,
Some of those talent on the FanDuel people or whatever, the TG TG, what do they call them,
TVG,
TVG.
yep,
Yeah, they'll say, well, they look good in the paddock, or they're prancing around. If they would show, the last 10 really good, picks or whatever, it would be nice. I've hit a third of them in the money, or it'd be
yeah,
nice that, but right now, they don't keep track of that. They might, but they don't mention it. That's disingenuous. You should tell us the number. So I'm just urging you, Dennis, to just get your little diary and write down
and the
something.
thing is I do have lists.
I know
If I
you
could
do
find them,
secret
I have the
stuff.
lists. I have the lists that I've put together for the rookies
Yeah,
um, for the last few years. I
yeah.
should go back
You
and
should have
grade
just,
those.
yeah,
I
just
should
look at
find
them.
those and grade what they look like because
Yeah. And
somewhere I've
so,
got them. Yeah.
Dennis, if you were wrong, wouldn't you like to know
Oh,
that?
you learn as more. You learn
Yeah.
more. in weather
Are you
forecasting.
better at running backs
Yes.
or wide receivers? I'd like
Yep.
to know that. Like, boy,
Yep.
Dennis loves his wide receiver. His data last few years, he's been pretty good versus he's been weak sauce on running backs. I mean, I would like to know that. It would
Yeah, and
help me out.
I know from just like the memory remembers the
Or it can
best.
be
Okay.
tricked.
And
Can be
it can be
tricked.
tricked. So, but I think I'm doing pretty good at running backs
My
of late.
feeling is, having drafted with you over the years, I would agree with that general feeling, but that's a feeling. I'd like to see
Yeah.
some numbers, Dennis. Come
Yeah,
on
I'll have
now.
to look. I
See,
somewhere
I'm
I've got
gigging you, Dennis. I'm poking you a little
I,
bit to
I
get you
should
off,
I
off
should have I
off the
should have
fence.
lists that date back a few years. So I
Don't
gotta
be
I
a
gotta
post
search and
turtle, Dennis. Okay, don't just sit there and run your arms and legs and flap your beak. I want you to really help us and the listeners
yeah,
out for
that's
you.
that's a good idea. Well, the,
Yeah,
the funny thing you talk about spotting the good looking horses.
yeah,
So Stacy was watching TVG with me the other day.
yeah,
Okay. And she always likes to pick out the horses by
yeah.
looks.
Yeah,
She'll
they're
say, "Oh,
pretty.
that, the number 3 horse, I think that's the winner." And she's actually got a pretty good eye for this. Well, the funniest thing is we were watching the other day or yesterday, as a matter of fact, and they had a race from um, Charlestown on.
Oh yeah,
First race from Charleston, $4,000 claiming horses.
oh yeah.
She couldn't find a good looking one in the
Ooh,
bunch. And then the next race that they showed was from Santa Anita,
yeah,
and they were 50,000 claiming maiden claiming race,
yeah,
50,000,
yeah.
2 and 3 year old or 3 year olds, I guess. And like a field of 12, she thought 8 of them looked
Great.
beautiful. So it was like, and I had to explain to her, okay, the one you didn't see any horses, you were saying that the lead horses were better looking than the horses.
Yeah.
Those were $4,000 claimers. That's the lowest you can go in
Yeah.
horse racing right now.
Besides the glue factory.
Besides some little podunk track out in New Mexico where they're running
Yeah.
for $500
Yeah.
claimer tag, but you won't see those on TV,
No.
type of thing. But the $4,000 claimers at Charleston,
Yeah.
they were running for a $15,000 purse.
The slots.
Yes. How crazy is
The
that?
slots.
Boy, that is it is boosting the the purses to an unbelievable level. I mean, you go ahead and claim one of these 7 or 8 year old horses,
And you bring them to
and
Charlestown and you just collect. If you
you
can
get
just hit the board,
one
you get a
win,
check. Yeah.
one win.
That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
those Cajuns down there in Evangeline and Delta are,
Whew.
they're doing it.
Yep,
Like I said,
that's crazy.
my nephew's ex-wife's married a trainer down there, and she'll post, when, and the purses nice. They're making
Yeah,
he's making a living down there between Evangeline and Delta, and goes up to Louisiana Downs in the summer. He follows that circuit and makes a living for him. Sure does.
yeah. I can believe it. I can believe it.
Yeah, good stuff.
Crazy
Okay,
stuff
man.
with the way these things are going.
Yep. Crazy. So I'm gonna stop recording here.